we all have the ability to get better. I think most of us are living below our own potential, not what other people want for us or wish for us, which is very different. That's sort of mom and dad's definition of success, or family or society. But like, what do you want? How do you get better?
Welcome to the Weekly Leadership Experience, a place for leaders to get inspired, be challenged, and grow. I am your host, Rashad Oberlander. Let's get started. Today's episode of the Weekly Leadership Experience is brought to you by my 7-day Leadership Growth Challenge. It's a free challenge that I've created, and it's delivered by email over the course of 7 days. I've created 7 compelling questions to challenge various aspects of your leadership, the way you lead, and why you lead. Go to rashadoberlander.com and scroll down until you find the 7-day Leadership Challenge, or look for the link in the show notes. And now, on with the show. Well, hello leaders, and welcome to the show. I'm joined today by Robert Glazer, founder and CEO of Acceleration Partners, a global partner marketing agency and the recipient of numerous industry and company culture awards, including Glassdoor's Employee Choice Awards 2 years in a row. He is the author of the inspirational newsletter Friday Forward and the Wall Street Journal USA Today, and international bestselling author of 4 books, Elevate, Friday Forward, How to Make Virtual Teams Work, and Performance Partnerships. He's a sought-after speaker by companies and organizations around the world and is the host of the Elevate podcast. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me. It's been a long time coming, and I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Thank you. Sad to be here.
So I've really been looking forward to this conversation. Quite honestly, it was a little bit of a struggle for me thinking about what I wanted to speak with you about. I feel like you've got so many interesting things going on, and you're tackling some interesting issues such as eliminating the 2 weeks notice. You've got some things to say about the traditional interview and remote work as well. So I guess I'd just like to start by asking, what of everything you have a hand in are you most excited or passionate about?
It's probably whatever I'm working on lately. So I actually just released one of the concepts in Elevate and Friday Forward is this notion of spiritual capacity. And it's not religious, but understanding your values and who you are and what you want is sort of the basis for downstream. So talk a lot about sort of discovering values and had a bunch of resources. And it's something we've done with our team. People would ask me about it a lot. Like, how do I do it? I'm like, I can't get on the phone with you for 2 hours. And there's not like an easy answer. So I actually took the course that I developed for our leadership training, the curriculum, and turned it into a course. Just released that a few weeks ago. And actually at the same time, like before I got on this, I had a follow-up call with one of our leadership sessions 3 months later, after they did the core value thing, kind of seeing where they are, pressure testing it, watching some of those things really click and come together. And it's really fun to help people figure that stuff out. I think it unlocks a ton. So I'm really hoping to get this course out to a lot of leaders and companies, because I think and people are doing it as teams. I think if you're clear around your values, it just everything else starts to slide into place for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned actually the spiritual capacity, because when you first look at spiritual capacity, I think you can probably sort of draw a line to sort of religious things, but it really. I
tried 100 other terms, and I don't like religious connotations, so I struggle. But there just isn't really a better one. It's kind of what you want or who you are, but yeah, it is not religious in any way.
Yeah. And it's a really great section of the book, to hone in on what your values are and what's important to you. So we'll probably touch on that a little bit more in a few minutes. But let's talk a little bit about your journey so far. You went to business school majoring in industrial psychology, now the founder and CEO of a highly successful performance marketing company, all the while inspiring people in life and leadership through your books and podcasts. So what has that road been like from then until now?
Yeah, I actually didn't go to business school. I studied business in undergrad, but if you want to start a business, don't go to business school. If you want to work in a business, then maybe business schools is a better fit. Getting back to the discussion that I was just saying before, I think like I had to figure out a lot of things, find what I was doing. Like a lot of these paths, like picture these streams. People can't see it now. These multiple streams, right? All this energy. I think somewhere 7 or 8 years ago, when I figured out this stuff, it's like all of the streams come together and you kind of realize like, this is the core of who I am and what I do well. And I'm doing the same things across multiple disciplines that actually fall under the same umbrella and the same purpose. And at that point, you start to see what is incongruous, or some things that frankly, like Friday Forward newsletter that has nothing to do with my marketing agency or business, like why that was something that was important to me and I wanted to carry through, and how it sort of fits in there. So I think that's been my story too. A lot of discovery, figuring it out, a lot of things that didn't work for me in the first half of my life, and figuring out why, putting that together, and kind of, it's only been 6 or 7 years since that all came together, but I think I've done more in those 6 years than I did in the first 30 something. So I think that's the power of the clarity around this stuff.
Awesome. And, like you said, it's kind of culminated into this singular stream. And, I'm a huge fan of your podcast. Your books, Elevate and Friday Forward, are just really good reads and inspiring in so many ways. And you discuss building capacity in these 4 areas: spiritual, intellectual, emotional, and physical. What was kind of, how did you come up with these 4? And then sort of what's so important about having capacity in those areas?
Yeah. So it's actually a longer road. I went and wrote, you may have known this from the book, but I read the Friday Forward book first. No one was interested in sort of a compilation book. And I met an agent who said, look, these stories are powerful. Clearly, I love your writing. It's connecting with people. Like, what is it? Like, what's the theme? And I spent like a year kind of going through it and said, all right, well, what are the themes or lessons, or why are these notes to strangers resonating? How are they similar to how I've improved my life, and also how we've grown our company kind of by investing in people? And I tried the 5 things, 6 things. And then after a lot of trial and error, I just came like, look, these are the 4 things I'm seeing everywhere in all aspects of self-improvement. This is why these messages resonate. This is our like personal development playbook. This has been my playbook. And I tested it enough to say, I haven't seen, I think sometimes, when you read a book and you knew generally what the book was about, but it just provides you with an accessible framework that lets you do something with that information. Like I find that capacity building it's not new elements before, but in this context, it just allows people to understand. And I think, we all have the ability to get better. I think most of us are living below our own potential, not what other people want for us or wish for us, which is very different. That's sort of mom and dad's definition of success, or, family or society. But like, what do you want? How do you get better going to get it? How do you take care of yourself? And then what are the, the relationships and the connections that you need to the world to do that? And I think if you look at it as sort of a, capacity building is just how you get better. And I think this is the scorecard. Like if you're not getting better and you look at these 4 areas, I think you'll see that you have a pretty big deficiency in one or more of them. And even for people who are improving, like, look, I fall off the rails of physical capacity all the time. It's the one I have the hardest with. In chasing spiritual and intellectual, I destroy physical. Like it is also just a helpful report card for those of us who are still even also feel like we're making progress towards potential.
Mm-hmm. And as you're saying, like you're kind of focused on these couple areas. So this one kind of falls off, and maybe when you assess yourself, you're strong in a couple of areas, but weak in others. So you focus on those, and maybe the other ones fall down. Like, do you ever find a real balance amongst those 4 areas, or is it always kind of one is going to take your attention, or 2 or maybe 3?
Yeah, spiritual, I actually think, is one that you spend some time with and you get it about 90% right. Like you don't kind of fall out of it. I think sometimes when you get tired or busy or whatever, you might kind of forget the things that are most important. But it's kind of like when you solve that, you can kind of usually leave that box running and check on it every once in a while. I think, the other ones, there's always one that gets a little out of whack. But I think if they're all performing at the same level, you'll really feel in that thing of flow. You'll say, look, I'm clear on my values and what I want, or I've set goals, I've got accountability, I'm learning, I'm moving in that direction. while I'm doing that, I've kept my like health and wellness and well-being kind of aligned. Again, sometimes in the pursuit of achievement, we kind of destroy our, body. And then I'm getting the right relationships. I'm getting the wrong relationships out of my life. And I'm also like, I'm focused on things that I can control. That's a big part of emotional capacity. And look, 2020 was just I was going to say epidemic test, but that'd be a bad pun. But in like what we can control and we can't control, we certainly cannot control the fact that there is a global pandemic. But I can tell you that some people have taken far more control of what they can do, during that global pandemic, while other people have just mailed it in and said there's a global pandemic, right? There's a difference between, look, no judgment. There's a difference in saying, look, just closing down my restaurant and whatever, and 2 days later, being on 4 delivery services, figuring out how to deliver alcohol, having like prepackaged meal things, getting out there and marketing, like both of those, both people had the same thing happen. There are definitely choices about how they controlled what came next. I think that's the biggest lie, one that we tell ourselves, is not separating the things that we don't control from what we can control. And even in a specific incident like that, there is usually 98% that we control and 2% that we don't control.
I mean, it's obvious that there's a crazy amount of innovation going on out in the world in terms of solving some of the problems resulting from the restrictions or close contact and social distancing and all these things. And I think, as you say, it's a lot to do with how people respond to the perceived uncontrollable.
Yeah, when you look at companies and cultures and ones that had a trust deficit and bad managers, but a micromanager before pandemic is not going to do well with remote work, right?
Right.
Someone who's got a trusting team and empowers them and clear goals. I think a lot of what COVID did is it took I always love this phrase, like the water went out and we kind of saw who was wearing their bathing suit. And not that it's not real challenges and things for people, but I think it highlighted and manifested a lot of problems that we already had, right? Problems with our education system, problems with businesses knowing who their customers were, problems with not digitizing stuff that people knew they were 10 years behind. I mean, one person at one of the business forums I'm in said they got done in 3 months what they hadn't got done in 5 years in terms of changes they need to make to their business. So, I think there's a lot of that at play.
Yeah. And maybe let's divert just a little bit for a few minutes here, since we're talking about some of the innovations and particularly remote working and how companies are adapting to that. There's a really big, I don't know, I'd say there's maybe 2 or 3 groups of people that are looking at this. And there's one group that's all for the remote work, and there's another group that's really against it. And there's some people that are just kind of lost in the midst of it. But companies such as yours and other companies out there are making remote work. What's the struggle and how do people actually begin to embrace it, I guess?
Yeah, I covered this in my latest book that just came out, which is the full-length version, How to Thrive in Remote Work. But I think it's really important that, let me go back to sort of what's working and not working. One of the things that we noticed in that book is that, as I alluded to before, the companies that are doing okay in this environment were the ones that had good systems, culture, processes, people beforehand. They adapted, they communicated, and whether they like it or not, or whether it's ideal, they're doing okay, right? Then there's the question of, and again, if you had a bad culture, distrust, micromanagement, like good luck in a remote environment with that, right? This is the companies where they're monitoring their employees with software and the employees are going on Amazon and buying mouse movers. Like this is a zero-sum game of having a high performance. If you're managing your team that way and they're buying things to trick you into moving their mouse, like you have a shitty business. Like I don't care what kind of business it is. So that's what's going on now. Then there's what comes next, right? And companies are going to have to make a decision. This has been, I think, 10 years of advancement in remote work. Groups who told me we were crazy and it never work, are like, oh, well, it can work. Doesn't mean we want to do it all the time, but like their assumptions were broken. And I think I actually saying that everyone's going to be remote. We're not going to have offices. But I think companies are going to have to come out after this. They're going to have to take a stand, and they're going to have to support that stand. So they might say, hey, we're all coming back to work, the office. And half the people might be like, look, we realize we don't need to go to work. We don't want to. And so they might leave. But you got to decide. On the flip side, the people might say, look, we love not having the office bill and don't need it. Our lease is up and we don't want to sign a new one. People will be like, we want to go back to an office, right? A lot of their people. And then there's this hybrid where I will say that I think this is where the most danger will happen. And I think hybrid can work if it is an intentional strategy that is well thought out and well executed. Hybrid is the absence of making a decision is going to be a disaster, because you're going to say, do what you want, but there are going to be norms and circumstances. Oh, so, Rashad said, like, I don't have to come to work, but like, I noticed everyone who's going into work and having lunch with him is getting better assignments. Or, I'm on the company call and I'm sitting at home and they're all in a conference room. Like, these are the things, like, again, it's not the core values on a wall, it's how people behave. Like, these are the things that will determine that. So I think, I do think hybrid can work, but I think it needs as much thought as intention and specificity. So my challenge to leaders, you are going to have to declare a strategy. You're going to have to support that strategy, and you may lose a third of your people because they want a different strategy. But I actually think that's better off than trying to appease everyone. Because if you decided, if that person moved 2 hours away and they decided they never want to go back to an office again, and you decided you want people in an office, like, that's not going to work. So don't try to save that. That's gone.
Awesome. I mean, it's a big subject. So thank you for sharing some information and insight there. Coming back to elevating, and I think it's interesting because it's still tied to the whole concept of how companies are going to make things work going forward. But out of the 4 areas, and I don't want to make an assumption, but to me, like, spiritual, deciding what's most important would be kind of like, I feel like would be one of the most important areas for me. Do you find that one area is more important and deserves special attention?
I don't think they're more important because they're independent, but I think they actually go in a logical order. So when you think about it, like, I think there are a lot of people who aren't clear on their spiritual capacity, but they're really good at physical, emotional, and intellectual, or intellectual, physical, emotional. And those people are like running hard in a direction, crushing it, doing really well in something that fundamentally probably won't make them happy or that they will enjoy. So that's the danger of having an awesome boat, like, going really fast in the wrong direction. I think you're better off going in the right direction and fumbling than, like, it's easier to get back than going 300 miles an hour in the wrong direction. Some people might argue the counter of that, where, like, if you did really well in something that you hated, like, you might then have the resources to do something that you loved. So, I mean, that could go either way. But I do think that's why they go in order. So it's, what do you want? How do you sort of, figure out what you need to learn, have discipline, execute in terms of going after that. I think then that sort of combination makes you take and value your physical capacity, like, because you see how important it is to feel well and be well while you're doing that. And then it determines who you interface and how you interact, with the world. Like, if you were going to pursue X series of goals, you might have a different set of relationships than Y series of goals. When you're really clear that when people get really clear on spiritual capacity, their friend circle tends to tighten. Like, they start to say, look, these people in my life are not adding value. They're actually detracting from what I want. Like, I'm someone who realized that, look, easiest example, product of your environment. If you don't want to drink, you shouldn't hang out with a group of friends that goes to the bar every night. Like, at some point, that is going to make you more likely to drink. And what you need is friends that don't go to a bar. So similarly, like, if you decide you're pursuing X path and you realize your friends are even detractors from that, or people in your life, like, then that's where you're going to need some real relationship changes.
For sure. I think that, like, this information to me is, like, so critical, and are things that I wish I'd spent more time figuring out as a young leader. So, like, or even just as a young person, like, doesn't have to be in a leadership
role. But no,
role,
young leadership is, look, and this is why we teach the core values to our leadership. groups because they have like epiphanies. Like I can be like, look, this is who you are. We figured it out. And I just said it to someone this morning. I said, like, this is how knowing this about you and your core values, said this is what you would have to communicate to your team. So this one woman had a core value of reliability. Like she's known for being reliable. She believes in reliability. Like it is her thing. I said, I saw this, like, just this thing of like release on her face when I said this. I said, so as a leader, you need to be super clear with your team that being late to meetings, being off or whatever is like really a no-fly zone for you. Like that is, for another leader, they might not care. They might be late to a meeting, but for you, that signals that they are unreliable, and that crosses a core value, and therefore that person is going to be in your penalty box. And I could watch it sort of come together for that. That's why I like doing this. Like it's fun to be like, holy crap, like, yes, that's exactly what I need to tell those people, and it will make my life so much easier.
Yeah. And I mean that the power, empowerment, and like sense of direction, and I know what I'm about is got to be so incredible for these people that you're speaking with, and for anyone that can figure this out.
We all start a leadership journey, and I think you should start this way. I don't think these concepts are helpful for a brand new leader. I think we start by collecting best practices, right? But my manager didn't, and we try a bunch of them on, and some of them don't feel like us. I think we see that, like, look, I saw that Susan did this, but like, it's not me. But I think you need a few laps around the track. And then if you really want to be a great leader, you need to authentically understand, know yourself. You need to say, like, if you join my team, and this is what I will do, I think here is why you would hate working for me, and here's why you're like working for me. And they're kind of the same, because here's what I value, here's what I do, and otherwise. And you just are unapologetic about who you are. You let everyone know, and you just lead authentically, and you don't try to be someone else, and you get aligned to a company that shares your values authentically, or you create core values. Like, look, if you start a company and you're a competitive athlete and you believe in winning, just tell people that. Like, don't say we believe in team and integrity, but like, we value winning. Now, that company is probably a company that'll have 40% turnover a year, but they'll probably also be a market leader in high growth, and they'll get a lot of people who want to go work there. It says, like, look, we believe that winning is everything. Like, and if you're in a race to cure cancer or a drug company or whatever, like that might not be a bad mindset. But I feel like people just say stuff, and they take stuff on people's walls and they put it up there and they don't mean it. And so it's just align what you think, what you say, and what you do. It's not for everyone. Your goal as a leader or a company should be to find the 2 or 3% of people that align to your company's or unique value proposition, not to say crap that appeals to everyone because you think it sounds good.
Mic drop.
I'm out on that. Yeah. I steal from the Gandhi quote that says, happiness is what you think, say, and do. Just think about how congruous an organization would be. Look, the things that we actually believe are the things that we actually say, are the things that we actually do. And that might be like, we believe in competition, and we believe that 20% of people should get 80% of the bonuses. Like, just say that. There's plenty of people who want to do that. What the problem is when you say we value teamwork and this and all that stuff, and you get those people in, and then they find out that it's very cutthroat and 80% of the bonuses go to 20% of the people. You've lied to those people. You haven't told them the truth about your culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can see that right away. Like, as someone, if you go, I've been obviously on job interviews before, but like, you read up on a company, you do your due diligence before you go to an interview, and you say, okay, these are all these companies' values. You go to an interview. Yeah. And like, even in an interview, you get that vibe of like, this is not
right. The company's values respect, and the person's disrespectful. If you ever want to understand in an interview, if you want to know if the company's values are real, you should ask a reverse behavioral-based question. Tell me a time when the CEO or a leader really, recognized someone or chastised them for going with or breaking a company core value. If they can't think of anything, if they can't even know what the values are, then that is artwork in the lobby. Versus if they say, oh, we have a core value of own it. And, last month there was a client situation where they were about to lose a client, and Sally actually just picked up, flew on her own, saved the whole relationship, didn't ask permission. And she got recognized and called out for own it by the company. Like, that's the type of story that you want to hear if you want to believe that those are real values.
For sure. So like, I don't want to kind of dwell on that, but like, where's the disconnect? Like, why do these become disconnected?
I think people have problems with their image, or self-conscious, or trying to be other people. Again, not clear. They're not clear about what they want. They're living that I'm living your core value playbook because I see that you're successful or otherwise, and I'm copying what you want, not what I want. So I just don't think people slow down to reflect, to think about this stuff, to do the hard work, and to say, like, look, there's a lot of people right now. There's probably some successful surgeon making a lot of money who deeply longs to be writing in a cabin in Montana, right? Because other people told them that's what success looked like, but that's actually not success for them. And I know it sounds trite, but the studies prove it. But money doesn't, over $74,000 a year, money doesn't buy you happiness. Like, if you're doing the wrong thing and you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you won't be content. You won't be fulfilled. The absence of money can make people unhappy, but I have a lot of friends who've sold their businesses and they are totally lost, and no one wants to hear about that problem, but they're not super happy. You would think. So I can promise you that it's not the money, because if it was just the money, they'd all be happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like an incredibly big lesson. Like I've spoken about that in some of my own material before, of like driving myself to reach a certain financial threshold, thinking that that's going to be successful, that's going to make me some level of happier. And like, when you get there, it's like, oh, this isn't that great.
Right. Because most of the people who set those type of goals, and the A-type people who do that, will also move the bar as soon as they get there. It's like, oh, celebrate. We got to that peak, next peak. Right. So it's not, they're wired to just move the goal post, on themselves as soon as they get there. But that's why I talk about, the connection between intellectual and spiritual capacity. Your goals need to fulfill your values, so that when most people, if you actually said, like, why do you want money? And you got, like, in a therapy session, like, why do you want the money? Whatever, it'll take a while. Whatever they wanted to do the money for is probably what they should work on doing anyway, or sort of like at the same, rather than trying to get to the pot of gold and then to fund that, figure out how to, like, do that as you're, as you're going along. And look, some people, it is a means to an end. I want to work at this job, whatever, so I can get $1 million, so I can then move to Africa and go help struggling kids, or whatever it might be. Like, well, that's 20 years where you're not actually doing the thing that fulfills you, hoping at the end of the rainbow you can take the pot to do that. If contributing and giving back to people is important, like, you probably want to get that into your journey somewhere.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it's an incredible journey, because I was that kind of A-type personality, right? Like, I mean, I'm still a bit of an A-type. I like achieving goals. I like setting the bar high for myself and stuff like that. But like, it's definitely a maturity thing. And kind of like you said earlier about how some of these concepts aren't the perfect place for a young leader to start, but it's a maturing process where, I realized that, some of the goals I set when I was younger were, that success image driven kind of idea. And then as you become older, it's like, wow, that wasn't congruent with my values. It's not actually important to who I am now. And it's not, actually propelling me any further in life. And you sort of shift that mindset. And I think
because if you don't know what you want, then you let other people or magazines or imagery or Facebook tell you what other people who are often very unhappy and just posting the highlights of their life and telling you, my wife and I joke, like, there's no better predictor to us than a couple getting divorced than, like, feeling like we're reading their anniversary card on Facebook. Like, we're awkwardly uncomfortable reading, like, what, because it's like, again, why do you feel the need to everyone to read that? Like, a couple of times I've been like, that should have been like a personal card to that person, not on Facebook.
Yeah.
And then 9 months later, you see they're separated.
Yeah. That's it. That's an interesting idea. And I mean, it is true. Like, the whole, like, Instagram, Facebook kind of perfect world that so many people want to live in. They just roll down to the Maserati shop and take a selfie with next to the Maserati. You know, like
you are seeing the top 5% of everyone's world on social media with everything else omitted, right? So you're comparing, your reality of 95% to their top 5%, which creates an impossible expectation gap.
Yeah, it's true. Coming back a little bit to your books, your podcast, big part of your material, you share all these wildly inspiring stories. Between your podcast and your written works, is there a standout favorite for you from any of that?
Standout favorite.
Two or one that's meant the most to you?
Yeah, well, two. I think two that stand out. Now, yeah, pick my children. The two podcasts that I come back to a lot are the Derek Sivers one, because I just think he's a brilliant mind and just someone who, you talk about how much, think about where we are now with no one agreeing and how much time he spends trying to understand opposite opinions and change his mind. And I just think he's a very original thinker. And then I think someone who's just had a huge impact in my life, makes impacts in people's lives in 10 minutes, is Philip McKernan. And just the clarity stuff. Like I actually felt like Philip, you could either go spend a lot of money and do a half-day session with Philip, or like he's talking directly to the audience in that podcast, and you can get a lot of the value of it.
Yeah, no, Phil McKernan, that was a powerful episode, and I got a lot out of that.
There's no one. So the joke about Philip is that in all the groups I'm in, like no one goes to dinner with Philip, sits with him or whatever for more than 10 minutes and isn't in tears. Like he asked the right question, or he gets just right to the heart of all the BS, and like everyone just breaks down. He's got a gift. So yeah,
that's awesome. Looking back on your career, knowing what you know now, what would you share with yourself or other young leaders just starting their journey?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of the same, but I think it's really to, take the time, figure out who you are, figure out what you want, and don't be afraid don't mistake busyness and doing a lot with, getting a lot done in a direction. Like, don't be afraid to pick what you want to do, say no to other things. Like, I've fallen into these victories of just more and more and too much. But I for me, a lot of the value is like, no thanks, like doesn't align, not part of my priority list, part of your priority list. I think you're going to, when you follow your own convictions, you're going to rub some feathers. You're, trying to make everyone happy is not a great recipe for success. You should try to make happy the people that matter most to you, right? Inherently, I found that like you're going to make some people unhappy, and actually trying to make everyone happy is getting stuck kind of in no man's land.
Sure, I get that for sure. If it's all right with you, I'd like to ask you a question that you like to ask your guests.
Sure.
I'm a fan of the question. They sort of end the podcast on Elevate often this way.
I hadn't thought of it, and if I had never thought of it, then I'd be, that'd be shame on me.
So forgive me if I get the wording wrong, but what is a personal or professional mistake, and it can be singular or repeated, that you have learned the most from?
Yeah. So every time I ask this, I do think about this, and there's a long list, but I'll give the thematic answer. And I think there's a quote that I'll probably screw up that someone once said, and this applies to anyone, but they said the longest time in an entrepreneur's life is the time between they know what they have to do and they do it. And I think there have been a lot of things along the way. I'm pretty good at seeing around the corner, where I know how something is going to play out, and I convince myself that it'll be easier to wait, it'll be better, it'll be less, and it's never easier, better, particularly when people are involved. I'll invent a lot of convenient excuses for myself as to why I'm not taking action, and it's never easier. So I think sometimes it's just when you know it, to bite the bullet, deal with it and move forward. And I dealing with one of these in the last couple of weeks where I just did the same thing. And now I found myself apologizing to people for it and people calling me out on it. And I just, it just, you think it's going to get easier, but it doesn't get easier.
Yeah. Kind of convince oneself that it's going to be different when you know that it's not.
Yeah. Like, maybe it'll work. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe on whatever. But, I think the discussion to have with yourself is, you had to bet $1 million on this. Like, where would you bet? And you'd be like, I wouldn't do it, so.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. Great lesson there. Last little bit here, Robert, and then we'll wrap up, is one of my final questions to my guests is, when it's all said and done, what are the 3 words you would want used to describe your life?
Meaningful, helpful, and relationship oriented.
Great. Very cool. I get that sense from your material. So thank you very much for being with me today, Robert. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
As we wrap up, is there any final comment you'd like to share with the listeners, and also where can they connect with what you're doing?
Sure. All of my stuff is now at robertglazer.com. So Friday Forward, podcast, books, all that stuff, course. Encouraged to check it out. Almost all of it's free, or you can get tons of information there. Sign up for Friday Forward. That's a good place to start.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and insights on elevating your capacity and some other great subjects here. It's been a great conversation, and really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, would you head over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, leave me a rating, leave me a review, and share this with a friend. It spreads the word and helps the podcast grow. You can also find me on social media at R.E. Oberlander. Until next time, stay awesome.